Hello. Today we're covering shopper research and the path to purchase, one of the most commercially grounded topics on this channel. Everything else we've discussed studies how consumers think, feel, or respond to research stimuli. Shopper research studies something more specific and more commercially critical. What actually happens in the final moments before a purchase decision is made? What do shoppers look at? What stops them? What goes in the basket and why? By the end, you'll know the key methods, how to use them, and what they can reveal that nothing else can. Let's start with the problem. Here's a gap that trips up a lot of brands. You study your consumers carefully, surveys, focus groups, concept tests, and you feel you understand them. Then your product hits the shelf and underperforms. Because what consumers say in a research facility, relaxed and thoughtful, is often very different from what shoppers do in a store, under time pressure, distracted, and scanning a shelf full of competing options in about 3 seconds. Most purchase decisions are made in the store, not at home, and studying the store requires completely different methods from studying attitudes. Here's the idea that anchors this whole field. The shelf is where everything either comes together or falls apart. You can have great branding, compelling advertising, a genuinely superior product, and still lose at the shelf because your packaging doesn't stand out in the 2 or 3 seconds a shopper spends scanning the aisle. The shelf is the final moment of truth. All the research and marketing investment that came before it either pays off here or it doesn't. Shopper research is how you make sure it does. Before we go into the methods, the most important conceptual distinction in this whole field, the same person has 2 very different mindsets, depending on where they are. In consumer mode, at home, relaxed, reflective, they think carefully about their preferences, their values, what they like. That's who shows up in a focus group or who fills out a survey. In the shopper mode, in the store, time pressured, with a list and maybe 2 kids in tow, they're scanning fast, relying on habit and visual shortcuts, making decisions they might not even consciously register. Same person. Completely different state of mind. Shopper research studies the second one, because that's the one that determines what actually goes in the basket. Shopper research is a set of methods that study consumer behavior at and around the point of purchase, in real store aisles, on digital shelf simulations, and across the full journey from category entry to basket. The goal isn't to understand what people think about a product in the abstract. It's to understand what they actually do when they're standing in front of it, under real conditions, making a real decision with real money. That specificity is what makes a shopper research so directly actionable for packaging, shelf placement, and retail strategy. The organizing framework for shopper research is the path to purchase, a 5-stage journey that every shopper moves through the aisle. First, category entry. The shopper walks into the aisle with some level of intent. Maybe they need plant-based milk. Maybe they're open to switching brands. Second, navigation. They scan the shelf, looking for something familiar or something that catches their eye. Third, engagement. Something stops them. A package, a color, a claim, a price tag. Fourth, selection. They pick something up and evaluate it more closely. Read the label, check the price, consider it. And fifth, conversion. It goes in the basket. The key insight is that drop-off at any one of those stages is a specific diagnosable problem, and each stage has a different fix. Let's apply all this to a brand from a previous video. Oatwave has just secured shelf space at a major grocery chain, a significant milestone. But now they have a new problem. They are one of a dozen brands on a crowded plant-based milk shelf, and they need to understand how they're performing in that environment. 3 questions drive their shopper research. Does their packaging stand out on the shelf? Can shoppers find them quickly when they're looking? And what causes a shopper to switch from their usual brand to O-Wave in the aisle, or to pick O-Wave up and then put it back. 4 methods will help them out. The first method is the shop along. A researcher literally accompanies a real shopper through a real store and observes their behavior in the aisle. Where do their eyes go? What do they pause at? What do they pick up? What do they put back? And at what moment? The researcher observes mostly in silence, with occasional neutral probes. I noticed you hesitated there. What were you thinking? Or, what made you reach for that one? The shop-along is the richest qualitative method for understanding in-aisle behavior because it captures the real decision and the real environment. The limitation is scale. It's one shopper, one store at a time. The second method solves the scale problem. A virtual shelf is a digital simulation of the exact shelf environment. Every product at accurate sizing, realistic lighting, and spacing. The same visual context as the real store, shown to shoppers on a screen. They're asked to shop as they normally would. Browse the shelf, pick what they'd buy. From that interaction, you can measure which products get noticed first, how long it takes you to find a specific brand, and what gets selected and what gets passed over. You can test hundreds of respondents, swap in different packaging designs, or rearrange the shelf, all without ever setting foot in a store or negotiating with a retailer. The third method catches shoppers at exactly the right moment, immediately after they've made a purchase decision while the experience is still fresh. An intercept interview is a short conversation, 3 to 5 minutes, that happens right in the aisle or at checkout. What brand did you buy? Did you consider buying anything else? What made you choose this one? Was there anything you almost bought instead? The timing is everything. Done immediately, you get the real decision reasoning. Done a day later in a survey, you get a rationalized story. The intercept is where you learn what actually drove the choice. The fourth method goes even deeper into the first seconds of shelf perception. Eye tracking technology records exactly where a shopper's eyes go when they first look at a shelf. The very first product they fixate on, the sequence of attention across the shelf, how long each product holds their gaze, and critically, which products they never look at all. For O-Wave, this answers the most foundational question first. Are shoppers even seeing us? Because a product can be on the shelf and effectively invisible if the eye never lands on it. Eye tracking removes guesswork from that question entirely. Here's a finding that surprises people who haven't worked in CPG. A large share of purchase decisions are made or changed in the aisle even when shoppers enter with a specific brand in mind. A shopper might intend to buy their usual oat milk and leave with a different brand entirely because a more visible package caught their eye first, or a price promotion on the adjacent product was too good to pass up, or they simply couldn't find their usual brand quickly and grabbed the next closest thing. The shelf doesn't just fulfill purchase decisions, it actively makes them. That's why what happens in the 3 feet of shelf space in front of a shopper matters as much as anything that happens in the weeks of advertising before they walked in. Shopper research tends to reveal one of 3 specific problems, and it's worth knowing all 3 because each has a different cause and a different fix. Visibility. The product is on the shelf, but shoppers' eyes don't land on it. The packaging doesn't stand out in the visual context of the category. The fix is redesigning for shelf impact. Findability. Shoppers know the brand and want it, but they can't locate it quickly in the aisle. A navigation and shelf placement problem. The fix is placement, blocking, and shelf signage. And conversions. Shoppers find it, pick it up, evaluate it, and put it back. The package isn't winning at the moment of hands-on evaluation. The fix is on-pack communication or price positioning. 3 different problems, 3 different teams need to know about them. Before you choose a method, you need to be precise about what you're trying to learn, because different shopper questions need different tools, and using the wrong tool wastes budget and produces misleading findings. For O-Wave, there are two distinct questions. First, how visible is our packaging relative to competitors on a 10-foot plant-based milk shelf? That's a visibility question, which points towards the virtual shelf testing or eye tracking. Second, what causes a shopper who picks up O-Wave to put it back instead of buying? That's a conversion question, which points towards shop-alongs and intercept interviews. Define the question first, then pick the method. Here's the matching logic in practice. If the question is about visibility and shelf standout, use virtual shelf testing or eye tracking. You need scale and visual data. If the question is about in-aisle decision behavior and the emotional contextual experience of shopping, use a shop-along. You need depth and real-world observation. If the question is about post-decision reasoning, why did they pick that one? What did they almost buy instead? Use intercept interviews. And when you're testing a new shelf arrangement or planogram, virtual shelf testing is the most flexible and cost-effective tool. Often two methods are paired, a virtual shelf test for scale across hundreds of respondents, and a shop-along with a smaller group for the qualitative depth that explains what the numbers are showing. Here's what the research reveals. From the virtual shelf test, O-Wave had the lowest first fixation rate on the shelf. When shoppers first looked at the plant-based milk section, their eyes went to competitors before O-Wave. Visibility is the primary problem, not findability or conversion. From the shop-alongs, shoppers who did notice and pick up O-Wave frequently put it back after looking at the price label. The package was communicating premium, but not telling them clearly enough why it was worth the premium price. And from the intercept interviews, the shoppers who did convert cited, "It caught my eye," or "I'd heard of it before," suggesting that brand awareness is doing some work, but the package isn't strong enough to close the deal at the shelf without that prior awareness doing the heavy lifting. Let's be balanced. The strengths of shopper research are significant. It studies behavior in the actual purchase context, not a simulation of someone's attitude toward a category. It captures decisions that self-report would never reveal, because shoppers don't consciously track what they looked at, ignored, or almost bought, and it's directly actionable for packaging teams, retail teams, and brand teams all at once. The limitations are real too. Shop-alongs are expensive and slow to scale. You're paying for a researcher's time for every single shopper observation. Virtual shelf testing is realistic but still not identical to the sensory and social experience of a real store. Intercept interviews still capture some post hoc rationalization, even though they're done immediately. And in-store research of any kind requires the cooperation of a retailer, which isn't always straightforward to arrange. 5 things to take with you. Consumer mindset and shopper mindset are different. Study both because they'll give you different answers to different questions. Map the path to purchase and find where the drop-off is happening, because the fix for a visibility problem is completely different from the fix for a conversion problem. Visibility, findability, and conversion are 3 distinct shelf problems with 3 distinct causes. Match your method to your specific shopper question. Shop-alongs for depth, virtual shelf for scale, intercepts for post-decision reasoning. And remember that the shelf is the final moment of truth. Everything in your brand strategy, your advertising, and your product development either pays off at the shelf or it doesn't. Get the shelf right, and everything else gets a fighting chance. Thank you for watching.